I'm Sandy Strader, and this is only my second speech I've given on quilts and that, so I'm not quite as nervous as I was the last time. And I recognize some of my friends from the quilt shop that I work at that come in, and of course all the other ladies that I know from here and the festivals and that. I appreciate you coming out, and then hopefully you'll learn a little more about the quilts from the 30s, and I'm going to kind of go in a few into the 40s and that, just not a whole lot, but there are a few things in there. During this period in America, the history was the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl years, and the Second World War. The stock market, of course, crashed in 1929, which is really what set everything off into going into the Depression. Men and women were without work all across America, and there was little money in households. So, you know, everybody had to go back to gardening. There was no waste anymore. You know, they had to start reusing their items. We think recycling's new, but it's been around for a lot of years and that. So they started using up. In fact, their words of wisdom were the day were use up, wear out, make do, or do without, and that. So, and I'm big on going ahead and doing the same thing nowadays. Salvageable portions of clothing were recycled into quilts. Scraps from dressmaking were also available. You could actually, like when they made dresses in factories, there were scraps left over, and they sold those from the factories by the pound.
We used to buy them a lot from the Philly Apron Company in Belleville.
Okay, yeah. Actually, one of these quilts, I have to look at the card, but one of these quilts, oh no, I take that back, I'm sorry. I didn't bring it. The quilts that are finished belong to a friend of mine. She has, she's collected them more than I have. I'm just really getting into collecting them because they're so expensive, and I'm sort of getting into that. But she actually made a quilt, and if you were at the quilt show at the Expo Center last week or 2 weeks ago, there's a Sunbonnet Sue quilt, and every piece except for one little Sunbonnet Sue was flannel. All the other fabric in that quilt was from the Apron Company in Velco and that. So I go, we have to get a piece of history. Darn, I'm jealous, you know. And that. So you could buy fabric by the pound. Someone's brilliant merchandising was the feed sacks, painting of fabric with the feed sacks and the sugar. And so, depending on what the women wanted, you could pick. She could pick from different brands. You know, like, oh, I like that brand's fabric better, you know, and stuff. So I have lots of examples. All that down there are real feed sacks, and feed sacks, you could tell when you look at them. There are holes along the edges where the string was in there. So this was like a smaller feed sack, and this is what it would have been, the shape it would have been in. And this is the sugar feed sack, and on this is what they would do is on the back there's a embroidery design, so they could take this apart and then do the embroidery. They say the blue's supposed to wash out, but my friend also has some quilts. I'll show you. The blue didn't wash out, and here's this lady brought her. These are, the backing is sugar sacks, and it still has the name of the company on there and everything.
Let me get that out of your way now.
Okay. And here is oops. Here is a feed sack or a flour sack, still with the label on. Which these are rare, that, you know, it's hard to find the ones with the label still intact in this good of condition. Yeah, flour, sugar, and then of course the feed. Here is one. This was a smaller one also, and somebody cut a piece out of it, but but she turned this so I could show you the stitching. It has just like regular stitching on one side, but on the back side it's like chain stitch, so it's sturdy enough. And
that's just one piece of thread.
Yeah, it's just like sewing. And they would also save the thread. because
Crocheted.
yeah, crocheted, or if they had to sew. So she said she'd always seen these little balls, you know, what's all these little balls of thread? Well, Grandma was saving the thread from her feed sacks and that. So this is a larger feed sack that carry, you know, and the when it had flour or sugar in it, the fabric was denser because you didn't want the flour and sugar getting out through the fabric in that. So, and this is just an example. They just didn't have this fabric wasn't just on feed sacks. I'm not sure if this is exactly. She wasn't sure if this was from the 30s, but I just wanted to show you. This actually I think is earlier, but they sewed it on yardage too. So this is like a 4-yard piece of fabric. So you could also buy this on yardage. All the, you know, and so the women would just collect the bags and make clothes for their kids or aprons. This isn't a feed sack, but this is the type of apron that they wore during that time period. This is actually my grandmother's apron. So I still wear it, and I've also made patterns off of it and made my daughter's each an apron out of that too. And they also would use like the unbleached, and they would make sheets. This is actually a sheet that my friend had from her grandmother. And that's, so it's got stains on it and stuff, but how they sewed it to make it fit the beds and that. So again, they're just feed sacks sewn together. You can see where the seams, you know, where they just sewed them together and that.
They took five bags to make a sheet.
5 bags to make a sheet.
You put one, and then you split the other one and you put it at the bottom.
Okay, well you've made them then.
Yeah, and all make flat-filled seams.
Oh, okay.
Manipulate on it. Still want to mark on your back.
Yeah.
And then again, here's another one she had. That the blue's still in there. It's a flour stack. You can see Pillsbury. And then I have to show this because this is my very first feed sack I ever bought, and I was like thrilled because I got it for like $3.50 for a yard. So it's so this is my very first feed sack. So, but I haven't been collecting, like I said, that long. I've been doing reproductions because, you know, like I said, this was actually $7, and I waited to the half price sale at the Expo Center, and then I got it for $2.50 or $3.50. So, and that. So that was what some of the feed sacks. And again, afterwards, you can look up at all the feed sacks and stuff. Quilt making swept the nation during the years between the wars, and they had competitions. 1932, the World's Fair had a quilt competition, so you know women would enter, and the grand prize was $1,000, and then it was $25 for regional winners. Well, that's a lot of money for people back then. So everybody, all the women were like, "Okay, we're going to enter," because every little bit helps the family out in that. So it was extra money for them. And again, it considerably helped them. Advertisements for patterns and kits suggested that selling homemade quilts would make money, and people more often did barters, would do, you know, you do this for me, I'll give you a quilt. And I still do that a lot of times with people because there's a lot of people that don't quilt, but they want quilts. So I say, okay, this is what I'll do. You know, so I'm big on doing that too. And some people would provide the fabrics, and other people would make the quilt, and then or make 2 quilts. They tried to do, and then each party got to keep one, and that. I actually have a little book here. That this is a catalog of patchwork quilts. That this is from 1939, and you could order the quilt that you wanted with the fabric already cut. Most of it was already cut. So there's different Grandma's Garden, and they had the embroidery work on here also, and that. So again, you can look at all this when I'm done speaking, and that. So catalogs mail orders were real popular during this time. Marie Webster, that lived in Muncie, or not Muncie, Marion, Indiana. She actually kind of started like the kit thing going, where you could buy the kits and make your quilts then. But her kits were already cut out, and all you had to do was sew them together then. Where a lot of quilts kits, they weren't sewn out, they just sell you the fabric and the templates and everything. You had to do it yourself and that. They also had the Kansas City Star would put patterns in their paper every week. I believe it was once a week. Oh, I put it underneath here so nobody. And I got some. They're just what I copied offline and that, and they would have the patterns, and so you could just make your own copy of the patterns. Different, and they also included, this one actually is the quilt design that they used, and that. We were just talking, I taught hand piecing class yesterday, and it was for beginners, and I taught them how to make a template out of cardboard. And someone was like, well, why do you want to do cardboard? And I said, well, because that's the way they would have done it, and it's always good. Besides, I didn't want them to buy a bunch of tools, and they're not going to like quilting. So I said, this is the cheap way, and everybody has cardboard or plastic lids in their house. So, but this is what this was in the paper all the time. So these are some of the patterns that was in the Kansas City Star newspaper. And that was probably the biggest newspaper that did that was, you know, the Kansas City Star. They actually still have books out, and they have a couple books from them that have to do with 1930 quilts and that. During the war years, rationing came, and women were asked to make scrap quilts for their own use and leave the blanket supply for the men. So that's again another reason the wool and that was used for the guys, the men overseas in their quilts, and that during the wartime. After that, after the war and into the 50s, a lot of women had an adverse effect towards quilts because they're like, they thought it was just, that's old stuff, you reused everything, you know, we want new stuff now, you know, that stuff's just like, no, I'm not doing that, you know. So they kind of got away from quilting for a long time, and in the 70s is when it really started coming back into faux and stuff. So of course now it's all the rage, or you know, a lot of people are doing it and that. So and plus the women started working. When the men were at war, the women got jobs in the factory. When they came back, women, a lot of them stayed in the factories or got into other businesses and that. So and so the world was changing. And then of course the movies came out, and so they got into the Hollywood movies, you know, where everybody was in satin, long gowns, fancy and stuff. So after seeing all that, they just didn't want anything to do with, you know, like these kind of quilts and things. And so some did go back to their home, you know, and started, you know, the same house cleaning and doing their handiwork. But the younger generation didn't want anything to do with, like their kids just didn't want anything to do with it. So we lost probably a whole generation of people that didn't want any kind of do any handiwork. Actually, in my family, I'm the only one that does any handiwork. And that I have 4 sisters, and I'm the only one that quilts, and all my girl cousins, none of them do anything. So I'm carrying on the family tradition, and hopefully my daughters will too. Again, talking back with the fabric, the colors were bright, and they're multicolor prints and the solid colors. Fabrics were used in quantities, and they were in combinations again with prints and that. And rarely do you find a print with just one color. You know, they always make the print comes in several different colors in that. The greens of the 30s and 40s are very distinctive, and this is a quilt around the world. Oh no, this isn't. This is the quilt around the world. And this is an example of all the different colors they had.
Did you piece that one or did you buy it?
No, this actually belongs to a friend of mine. Yeah.
For free, yeah.
Yeah. So this is her quilt around the world. So it has all the different prints, different color prints that they had, and the different colors from the time period and that.
My mom made a trip around the world out of just 1-inch blocks. Yeah. In fact, I have it. She put it with you. Yeah.
1-inch blocks are really. Oh, I was talking about Marie Webster. This is just like one of the types of quilts, the kit quilt. And this is the 3 Little Kittens baby quilt. And that. So everybody get to see that. So this again was from that period. And then this where is applique roses, and this was a kit. Again, the kits became really popular during the 30s.
It's not quite like
And that.
So the kits weren't that expensive?
No, not during this time period. The kits for a rainbow quilt, which was 90 by 94 inches, was $3.75.
oh my.
$3.75.
To buy it made?
No, to make it. To buy the kit. And that was postage paid. Let's see. Fine. They had an Oriental Poppy, and it was $5. And that was 83 by 91, and it was ready cut. So it was already cut for you. You just had to follow the directions. So
those applique quilts were not cut out. The pink came stamped on just on a pink sheet. The lighter pink was on another, but they had code numbers.
Oh, okay.
And underneath each thing there is a number to match the correct pink.
Oh, okay.
To those, yeah.
Okay.
And the stems were all made of bias tape. That's bias tape.
Oh, yeah. People do the bias, on the stems and that. Here's one called First Lady, and it's $6.50, and it's 86 by 96. But this one has a lot more, fancier, and that. And I actually I came across this book. Somebody donated or gave me a bunch of fabric that they didn't want anymore, and some of it was like poly, and this was actually in there along with some quilt blocks too. And I went, okay, I'm keeping these. So. Okay. This one is she calls this the diamond field. So, and if you were at the quilt show, this was hanging up there too. This was at the quilt show also. So if you guys know Sandy Rice, this is her stuff. She was kind enough to let me borrow. And this is Grandma's Garden. Well, the hexagons, so they have different names depending on how you did it. And this is what they call the 30s green. You know, everybody says that green. This is that green. Yes.
I know I've already asked, but it is all hand quilted too, is it not?
Yes. Yes.
So how many hours do you think?
A lot. Hexagons are not. Everybody says when you do Grandmother's Garden, you'll never do another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you finish it, you will never do another one.
My mother started Grandmother's Garden for my older brother's crib.
Uh-huh.
She finished it for his 25th wedding anniversary.
Yeah. Well, at least she finished it.
But it ended up with twin size.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so they couldn't even snuggle.
Yeah.
My applique quilt was irises instead of roses.
Oh,
But my
okay.
sister bought my kit for me for my 25th wedding anniversary. I finally finished it for my youngest daughter's 50th birthday. I just had little pictures. I just made up my mind. If you set a date to do something,
Yeah.
you do it.
Well, my first quilt took me 9 years, and I should have brought it because it was all cross-stitched, and it would have went into like the 30s that they had, but it's in my closet. But they had, it took me 9 years. I cross-stitched it in about 9 months. I was pregnant with twins and had a little guy. And I did my cross-stitching while I was pregnant. And then after I had them, you know, it took me a while to get back to it. And then my mom for Christmas one year, I said, I want a backing and batting, so I could do it. And my aunt and grandmother helped me, you know, do it, lay it out. That was my first big quilt. And so they laid it out, and then from that point it took me 9 years to quilt it. So, you know, because I was raising kids. Then I moved to Memphis. I ran out of quilt thread, and evidently they don't believe in quilt thread in Memphis because I couldn't find quilt thread. So when we moved back up here, I started and I had it finished in a month. It was, you know, so I didn't know anybody again when I moved back up here because, you know, everybody moved off and stuff. So I did finish it. So every time I start to make a quilt, the joke was my kids would ask, well, like a baby quilt, they said, well, she'll have it done by the time she starts college. Or, you know, I'm not that bad. I do get them done quicker now, but, you know, that was the family joke for a while. This one's called Baby Bunting. That's just the design. If you turn it another way, I'm sure it's like Drunkard's Path and that. But this is very small squares too, so. And that. And again, these are all actual, I don't know if they're all Fesex, but they are from the time period fabric and that. So it's nice and bright.
Were all these quilts hand pieced and hand quilted?
I don't know about if these were hand pieced. Well, this was, yeah, this definitely was, yeah, the hexagons was. They were all hand quilted, and that. But I'm assuming they probably were hand pieced also. Yeah, this one was. So I'm assuming they were in that. But again, they had sewing machines since before the Civil War, and a lot of people did have sewing machines in that. So that wasn't. Some people would have used sewing machines. This one's called a coffin quilt. And it doesn't go in the coffin or anything. It's just the coffin. The shape of the block looks like a coffin. Yeah. So that's the shape. And also with this one, I believe this is the one. There is no, maybe I'm wrong. Let me check and make sure. Yeah, this is the one. every one of these blocks are different. So it's like a charm quilt also, so each one of these are
Where
different.
is the block in it?
The what?
Where is the block in it?
The block?
I mean, just,
Right here's the block.
okay. Well, I know that's a block, but is there a pattern how they were set together to make a?
No,
Okay.
no.
No, they were just put
That's
together.
Just
what
put
I was
together,
I was
yeah.
trying to see if there was.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And then, this one's just a top, and this is called cactus flower. Again, this is that green. Again, this is hand pieced, like I could tell by the stitching. So
It matches your dress.
I'm a little more tealer, but yeah, it's close.
How are the red parts of that put on? Is the red part?
They're applique on.
Applique, yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is pretty, yeah.
And then this is just a string quilt. And this actually belonged to my friend's grandmother. This one's heavy too. You need to fill this one. This one's, I think she's got another quilt inside here. I think that's what they did. They layered the quilt for
Uncut and
the,
recover.
Yeah. yeah, which that was popular to do instead of when your old quilts got holy, they just put a new top and backing on it. So, and this also, I remember her telling me this, and I gotta make sure. This is feed sack or flour sacks, and they dyed it. So so it would be colorful instead of blah.
So it'd be that green.
That green, yeah. It's that green. Everybody calls it that green, and it's distinct because you go and it's hard to find that green even now with the reproductions.
It's not that green.
Yeah, exactly, and it's hard to find that green. Yeah.
You know, I just asked why it was called a string quilt, and I think that's interesting because they use the little scraps.
Yeah, they use the scraps and just put it on like a foundation. Well, some would put it on foundation, and some just sew it. Just sew it around.
When you say a foundation, do you mean like these,
Yeah, they would have put it on
another piece of
yeah.
fabric?
and then just sewn on it
Okay.
and that. And this
They
is.
actually have a block in which they use newspaper.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
that too, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that too. One of my books had where they had, when they had opened the part of the quilt, there was still like newspapers in there. And this is actually one I found at a yard sale.
Wow.
And I didn't pay very much for it. I think I paid like $20 for it.
Wow.
And that. There was some damage on one of the corners, so I was sort of working on fixing it and that. So, but this is applique, and again, this would have been what they would have done. I'm not saying this. I know it isn't that green, but I can tell it's not that green. But it's just the same kind of work they would have done during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And these are mine, but these are like, Mary knows this. These are reproduction fabrics from what they had during the 30s.
Yeah.
And this, some of this was my fabric, and we had a bag, what we call a bag lady swap. You just put all your fabric in a bag and then give it to someone else to make, and I got this back.
Wow.
From somebody that's supposed to be, works at a quilt museum type thing, and I was like, okay, so this is like my ugly quilt. But I love the fabrics in it, but it's just sort of, I kind of expected a little more, you know, from somebody that works in a quilt museum, you know, so. And that, but it's just some of the different fabrics that they had during that time period.
It does showcase your fabric.
Yes, yes, it does. That's the one thing about it. The only thing, I am going to take off this brown and purple border, because
Oh, I would.
I'm just not,
Oh,
um,
Well, the purple's great, the brown would be.
yeah, the brown's kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is another one. This is actually, I was just sewing blocks, fabric together, and then my one friend goes, I was at her quilt retreat, she goes, what are you gonna do? And I said, I don't know, and then I cut them in half, and then I put the green through it. And I call this my grandmother's garden, so. So it's just, again, different quilt, or different reproduction fabrics. So then I showed you the reproductions, and then, you know, some of the real things that they have out there in that, so. And the greens, again, were very distinctive. The Nile green, the mint green, along with the rose colors and the, which they also call bubblegum, the bubblegum pink, and that usually indicates the 30s quilts. And they were used in combination, especially in applique, the pinks and the greens. And they, again, used it with a white or off-white background. And that. And in the 40s, military style styles influenced the olive greens and during the time period. But they weren't limited to the greens. They used intense greens, yellow greens, chartreuses were common. The turquoise came into in the 50s and 60s was when turquoise really started coming in. Navy blue started coming into its own during the 40s. And in the 50s it progressed, and the reds and the whites were the norm for color accents. Dark blue is always a classic. You know, we had the red and white quilts, the blue and white quilts. Those are classic quilts all the time in that. So.
Was that in the 40s? What period was that?
The pink, or the blues
And the red and white quilts?
Well, they've been through the 1800s all the way through. They're just popular. They're always popular. Even now, people love to do the red and white quilts and the blue and white quilts. I mean, I work at a quilt shop, and we have books on, and there's always at least probably one book, couple books, there's the red and white quilt in it, because they're just classics. And that. Pastels weren't common as they were in the 30s, and they were replaced with medium and darker colors. And that. The yellows became more golden into the 40s, and they used them in combination with browns, and lemon yellows was also apparent, and canary yellow. The bright and cleaner yellows and oranges were used in the 50s, so they started coming into the 50s. Most backgrounds were not solid black, and most had a white ground with black on it, and that. And I showed you all the quilts that I had. And like I said, the prints are from the era of the time, and that. So they have a variety of colors and things like that. And then if I'm just going to, again, they did the piecing, most of it by hand, but again, they have sewing machines, so they did do that. Embroidery is popular, especially like the French knots and the buttonhole, like on a lot of the applique buttonhole stitch was done. A lot of times, depending on the design, and I was going to bring one, I forgot, they use black thread to accent it, and sometimes like on the rose one, it's the blind stitch.
what is that blue piece on that quilt, on the back of it?
The-
Or is that still, that's the front.
Yeah, this is the front, yeah.
I could only see the,
Oh, yeah, this is the
okay.
front. And that, start in the 30s also, there's Sunbonnet and Sue, Overall Sam, and they're still popular nowadays. Bill and Jim were common figures, which were appliqué in the buttonhole stitch. So I don't know who Bill and Jim was, but they were popular evidently. I haven't seen Bill or Jim, so I just seen Sunbonnet Sue and overall Bill. Sam. Pansies and butterflies were popular during this time period as appliques and that. And some of the applique quilts had design elements featured only the solid fabrics with the colors, which is like the roses. And again, they were kits. Most of them were kits, a lot of kits. Of course, people did do their own. Not everybody bought the kits. And again, they had the newspaper articles and things. Also during this time period, fundraising for using quilts for fundraisers was very popular, as it was all through time. Civil War, they did that also. So they would have fundraisers to raise money for different things, community service, programs, that whatever they needed, the community, or they wanted to send stuff to somebody, or help a family out. They would have a quilt sale or raffle and that fundraiser. I know a lot of churches still do that. They have quilts, fundraise them, and then my aunt lived in Southern Illinois, and her church did a fundraiser. She made the quilt. Somebody from the church bought the quilt, and it hangs in the fellowship hall, and that. So, and it was funds to make the addition onto their to make a new fellowship hall. So, the quilt hangs in there. So, again, all the quilts were promoted through the ladies' magazines, the newspapers. Lettering from this period was most often done in outline, and then you stitched your embroidery. So if they were doing embroidery and that. Quilts were made for art's sake, provided creative outlet. We all need outlets. Sometimes my husband says, "Your sewing room's calling you." I'm going. See ya. It doesn't take a whole lot for my sewing room to call me. I spend a lot of time in my sewing room, so and you can see it because everything's a mess. So because I go from one project to another without cleaning up, and so then I have these piles and stuff. So pictorial themes were common. Again, they would do, like, I know there were some quilts, like I believe in the World's Fair, that had pictures on them and that. People do, like, the cross stitch were pictures and that. In fact, they became more common, and many were unique, and they were in the Century of Progress competition in 1933. And a few women made quilts depicting the United States map, and that, yeah. So, cotton satin tees were coming into use with the applique again, but this was in the later 40s and into the 50s, and that. I know a lot of people. Some people use it. The only thing I use that's satin or silk or anything is when I'm working with ties. Other than that, I stay away from satin. I like my cotton and that. The majority of the battings in this era were made from cotton, and they were purchased from a general store, or they could order it mail order, and from like Sears or J.C. Penney's. I actually, last year, a gentleman I met at the Akiki River Fest gave me an antique quilt frame, and he gave me some of his mom's quilts, which I'm going to show you one because this is early 1900s, so this isn't, and it's hand pieced. Yeah. And he also gave, I got a couple other quilts from him, but his mom, all the batting and stuff, she had like a thin bat or a thin blanket from Gumby Ward's, and it was still in the bag. And I think she paid like $5, so it's been a while since she had bought it. So I thought that was pretty neat. And that white thread was used most of the time. They used the white thread to match their quilts and everything. And during this time period, moderate amount of quilting was done on their quilts. Unless they were doing like the floral. This one does have a lot, it's cross grid or a grid on this.
Was that stamp where the quilting is? Did the blue wash off of that? Was that pattern already in there?
The blue is off.
Uh-huh.
No, I take that back. You can see the
So
blue dots.
It was stamped.
Yeah, this was
Dots
stamped.
on it, yeah.
And evidently, when they said it washes out,
Yeah.
no, because you can see the blue dots on here and that. So I'm just going to get to some of the quilt blocks that they did, and then if there's any questions, you guys can. And then
It's
we
not
have,
midnight yet.
huh?
It's not midnight.
Well, I think the library closes at 9, and they might get a little upset if we keep them. And this gives you time to ask questions and to look at the fabric. And I brought books from the time about quilts from the 30s and stuff. But I started in 1929, and these I'm just going by the quilt blocks I had found from the time. Of course, they were more than what I'm saying, but 1929 they had a block called Airplane, Broken Circle or Sunflower, Cross and Crown. And again, some of these are older than that, but these were, again, popular ones. Bride's Bouquet, Milky Way, Merry-Go-Round, Cactus Flower, Christmas Star, Bridge, Sheepfold, Prickly Pear, and Pontiac. 1932, Log Cabin, Mr. Roosevelt's Necktie, Fala, which was Mr. Roosevelt's dog, Crazy Ann. 1933 was Bridal Stairway, Double Arrow, Cheyenne, Airship Propeller, Triplet. 1934 was Broken Circle, Whirling Pinwheels. 1935, Apple Leaf, Coffee Cup. 1936, Cups and Saucers, A Young Man's Invention, Airport, Chinese Puzzle. 1937, Skyrocket, Basket of Diamonds, Rope and Anchor, Winged Square. 1938, Contrary Husband. Oh wait, 1939,
that look like?
Tea Quilt, Pig Pen. I might have it in one of my books here. 1940, Double V, Comfort Quilt, Mother's Favorite Star, Mona's Choice. 1941, Anna's Choice, Silent Star. 1941, Nine Patch, Radio Windmill, Contrary Wife. See, yeah, I got even. Star Spangled Banner, Army Star, Colorado Quilt. 1942, Drunkard's Trail, Broken Sugar Bowl, Signal Lights, Molly's Rose Garden, Victory Quilt, Sunlight and Shadows. 1942, Salute to the Colors, Shepherd's Crossing, a basket quilt in triangles. 1943, Mountain Peak, Propeller, Spider Web. 1944, the new four-pointer, Brave World. 1945, Quilt Mosaic, Hope of Hartford, Liberty Star, Victory Block. 1946, Return of the Swallows. 1947, Christmas Star, Seashell. 1949, The North Star, A Flash of Diamonds, The Kansas Star, Crazy Ann, and The Bright Jewel. There's some other blocks, I didn't have dates when they came out, or Stars and Stripes, Cabin Window, Cherry Blossom, or excuse me, Cherry Basket, Army Star, which I guess I did say Army Star earlier, Arkansas Star, and Butterfly. And also, during the Second World War, as they did in the first, the Service Star flag came out with the one star. That's actually came out in during the First World War, but they used to again in the Second, as we still do now. And that. I also wrote down a few fun facts, or some facts, not all fun, but 1929, William Faulkner published The Sound and the Fury. The stock market crashes first on October 24th, and then again on Tuesday, October 29th. 1930, 3M employee Richard Drew invents Scotch tape. Scotch brand cellulose tape, now known as Scotch tape, so it had a lot longer word. Mickey Mouse comic strip debuts in January. In 1931, Al Capone was convicted of income tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. 1932, Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt defeats Herbert Hoover. Okay. 1936, the Boulder Dam, now known as Hoover Dam, is completed 2 years ahead of schedule. Jesse Owens wins 4 gold medals during the Summer Olympics. Ty Cobb, Walter Johnson, Christy Mathewson, Babe Ruth, and some other guy, I can't say his first name, but his last name's Wagner, became the first inductees. What was it?
Homer.
Okay, there you go, you got it. First inductees into the Baseball Hall of Fame. 1937, the German airship Hindenburg is destroyed while attempting to land at Lakehurst Naval Air Station. American aviator pioneer Amelia Earhart disappears over the Pacific Ocean while attempting to circumnavigate the globe. 1938, Superman debuts in Action Comics. 1939, Gone with the Wind won the Academy Award for Best Picture. 41, Marvel Comics introduces Captain America. After 14 years, approximately 14 years, carving at Mount Rushmore concludes. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor on December 7th. 1942, Anne Frank and her family go into hiding in Amsterdam. 1943, Walt Disney wins Academy Award for his animated short film, De Furo's Face. 1944, band leader Glenn Miller disappears while en route to Paris. And in 1945, Japan surrenders to the U.S. on August 15th. And that's all my facts, my history lesson for today, which you guys probably knew, but I just found those, so I thought I would. And this quilt it actually it's called Egg Money Quilt. I got out of one of my books. It's called Egg Money. The women would sell their eggs, and then they would buy some of their fabric or their sugar and things. So they get. So these are just different blocks from the time period. Also, I have to look exactly what their names are right off the top of my head. I know that's part Wedding Star, Drunkard's Path, Dresden Plate.
This one?
This one I made.
Yeah, very pretty.
Yeah, this one I made. So, any questions?
Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
Going back to the start, when you had the flour sacks and other things, why were there patterns on that?
Why were there patterns?
Why wouldn't they just leave them plain? Wouldn't it have been cheaper?
Not really, I don't think, but they made patterns because the women could use it to make clothes.
Okay.
And because everybody didn't
So
want
they
to
were
walk around.
thinking ahead and repurposing
Right,
it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so,
It was a solid.
yeah, that's why this is supposed to wash out. They would actually some women use this for like their undergarments.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I brought the book too. I have a sewing book from 1949. It has instructions on how to sew your underwear, how to make your underwear. Don't think I'm going to do that, but it was kind of interesting though, But that's why. So they would make their shirts and the kids' clothes, dresses. Again, repurpose instead of because it came in burlap at one time too, but. When you could put this, women are going to go, I want this, I need this
I want
much.
this brand.
Yeah, this brand, so I can do this pattern, yeah, this is how much seed you have to buy for this, yeah, so, yeah.
And if you were,
I
if
still
you came
have
up a little short,
one of
you
those
sent a
two.
sample with your husband to the feed store, and he had to go through all the
Yeah.
bags until he found another bag that had that same bag.
Yeah, yeah, so that was the whole point of doing this like this, so, because again, there was no money and that, so this is how they got their clothing and that, or help, offset things.
Did you make the teddy bear?
No, that's actually a friend, and it's hers, and this is stacks.
It's a seed sack, like
Yeah.
Timothy seed or
Um,
something.
But in his ear has the name of one of the companies, was called Bemis Bag Company, and his name's in the ear,
Yeah.
and that, and you want to know how long they made the sacks?
Yeah.
Let me look this up here. I know it was through the 40s at least.
It was through the
50s.
40s.
Okay. Yeah.
My great aunt and uncle had a large feed and seed store in Anderson, and I just have a vague recall of feed coming in the store in the early 60s in
It was
print
the same,
bags.
yeah, so probably,
I think
Into
the
the
very
60s.
the very beginning of the 60s was the end of it.
they probably just didn't use it like we, I mean, a lot of the country,
Goods.
huh?
You could buy yard goods.
Right,
It
yeah,
wasn't terribly expensive.
right, so,
Actually, I was down in the southern Utah
Right, I know.
in March, and there is a flour company in Cortez, Colorado that still packages its flour in cloth bags. I was trying to decide whether it was worth carrying 10 pounds of flour or
I was just going to ask you, what's the name of that company I could write to them and say?
Mills.
Bluebird Mills?
Yep,
In
in Cortez, Colorado.
Cortez, Colorado. Is my secretary writing that down?
Somebody will. Yeah.
They sell, they sell on the Navajo Reservation, which is where I saw, but
Oh,
Cortez is a fairly
Oh,
large
yeah.
town, 4,000 or 5,000, which is big for that part of the world.
yeah.
The feed sacks were popular for dish towels.
Yes, yeah, actually, yes, I did think about that, but I remember my grandmother having the feed sack towels. And at that time, I didn't realize what it was.
I
But,
still have some that I dry the dishes with.
Oh, I mean, she died, well, it's been a while since she passed away, but she still had those towels. And they didn't wear out, because I don't think there was any holes in them or anything, They might be a little stained here and there, but I mean, And I know there was a big apron shop, or apron warehouse in, Ohio too, but I think they're close too. But I'm not seeing exact dates, but they're probably, like you said, they went into the 60s. And that, well, except in Colorado, they're still doing it.
There may be other places also.
Yeah, you just have to, it's just not like now, everybody buys their fabric by the yard now, so it's sort of like,
When did the quilting bees?
pardon?
When did quilting bees begin?
They began back before Civil War.
What
Yeah.
was the question?
Quilting bees. Yeah, they probably did those, 1700s through. I know Civil War, they were real popular. In fact, my aunt's church, my great aunt's church in Southern Illinois, they still got together and did quilting bees in their fellowship hall on that. So, I mean, some churches still do that,
The
but not.
Lutheran church here in Quilts quilt still. I
Oh,
don't know
do
if
they?
do it for money, but that was going on when I was just a little bitty kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think they did it for, I think they charged a penny a yard.
Oh, for the.
You count however many spools of thread.
Right.
That's how the cost went on.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know, like a lot of churches again, and people still do the quilting bees. It's just you don't hear about it. Back then, people didn't have phones and they didn't have where they could travel. That was their outlet, their social events. The women got together. They did their gossip and talking and things. And then in the evening, the men would come. They'd be done quilting. The men would come and they'd have a big meal and socialize, dance, and that too. So that was their social events.
I have a question on the battings that were used.
Yeah.
When I first started quilting, you could go like to Lowenstein's or Woolworth's dime store, you buy it all rolled up, and on the outside there was always a wrapper that either had quilt blocks itself or quilting designs.
Oh, okay.
And then you could save those and copy those off.
Yeah, actually Mountain Mist batting, they still have those in
Do
their,
they?
yeah.
And does
Yeah.
the patterns on them and everything too?
Yeah, still has the patterns, inside and that,
Yeah,
so. You're talking about just a paper pattern, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mountain Mist still, as far as I know, they still, and last time I bought some was probably a couple years ago, but they still had the pattern inside it, yes. In fact, I probably still have some somewhere in one of my boxes somewhere. I save everything. I don't get rid of anything, if it has to do with fabric or anything like that, so. Any other questions?
I had gone to a garage sale some years ago and got a beautiful quilt made out of silk ties.
Yeah, actually, the lady that I got some stuff from, it was that little book with the patterns in it, the Quilt Kids. She had passed away, so like I said, I was able to get the items. I have 3 boxes of ties, and I know they're like, some are like the nylon type, but a lot of them are ties from the 50s and the 60s, the silk ones, and because I remember my dad wearing those kind of ties, and he only wore them to church, he wasn't a businessman, and I remember my uncles and other men wearing those kind of ties, and I'm like, okay, I'm saving these, because I'm going to make another tie. I made a tie quilt for one lady for a memory quilt because her husband passed away, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a tie quilt. Like, I seen the tie quilt at the expo center that lady had made and stuff, so I'm like, so yeah, I don't get rid of ties. That's the only silk I'll work with is tie silk, and that, so. But they're beautiful,
I have a quilt that I treasure came from an auction, and it was just in a big box of items, and it was in a plastic bag down in the bottom of the box, and it was just the top. It was the patchwork quilt with the dark figures and a fan made with the ties and ribbons and embroidery
nice
on it and everything, and it hadn't been finished, but there was yellow silk fabric that was in the bag with it, and she had a little note on there that said that and it's got a block that is dated 1853.
Oh wow.
And she had a little note in there that said, by the time I got this quilt finished, pieced, they were no longer popular.
Oh.
So whoever gets it, please finish it. or don't use it for a rag or don't burn it.
Oh, that's nicer to include it. Well, if it has like cigar ribbons or any kind of ribbons, those really help date things, and because a lot of during the 30s and even earlier than that, the early 1900s, the end of the Civil War, and they used cigar fabric, all kinds of ribbons from.
What was fabric used for cigars?
I think they're to wrap them or something. Instead of paper.
Right, they wrapped them. Or another thing that they did was they had some in cigarettes and some in cigars. So you see some of them this size and some of them this size. Flannel that had a design printed on it. World flags were very popular, for example.
Yes, they were.
And so you would buy a package. A man would buy a package of cigars, and he would get his wife
that piece of
the
fabric.
flag of Persia. Okay. Well, so then you could buy more of the cigars, and she could get more flags. The first thing you know, then you put them together, and you made a
Yeah,
You know, you made a quilt out of them, I got one,
This
it's
is really amazing.
Yeah, you're just like, make sure you don't get Persia again, you know what I mean?
Or find somebody whose husband spoke the same
Yeah.
way that you could trade.
Yeah, trade, yeah, and that, but, and if they had ribbons, cause there's some that had like from the,
Yeah.
Progress of the, or Century Progress, 33 World's Fair, they had ribbons and things like that, or put in quilts,
Well, 19.
you know, all kinds of ribbons, because they didn't have like the nylon ribbons we have now when they win things, they were the cloth ribbons and stuff, so that's very popular in quilts, and those are, you know, can help date a quilt, plus it adds to the quilt with that on there too, because like, there's not a whole lot of them, you know, the silk starts, you know, wearing and stuff. That's like crazy quilts, most crazy quilts, the silk will be starting to disintegrate because it just doesn't hold up and that, so.
So Laura, did you finish?
Any other questions?
Yes, you did finish it. I didn't finish it, but you had it finished.
Oh.
No, I did it for
And you have it, of course.
Oh, yes.
And you have it stored or hanging or?
I have it, I don't know where it's at.
I put you on the spot.
Somebody will buy it, somebody will buy it at a garage sale.
Well, at least it's finished. I'm going, where do you live? I want to come to your garage sale.
No, never.
Well, if you hang it up, make sure it's out of the sunlight. And if you store it, don't store it in plastic. Have it roll it, and if you roll it, get acid-free tissue paper or a sheet or a muslin or something, and stick it in the rolls and store it in a pillowcase because it breathes. If you keep it in plastic, plastic can get moisture, and then you have mold problems and stuff. So, any other questions? Okay, you guys could come look at all the stuff, or.
Well, I thank you, Sandy, for coming out. Really interesting.
I enjoy it. Quilting, in case you